Hi everybody, so today we're going to be talking about baroreceptors, and if you've seen the video that I made on tactile receptors, you'll see that we have different types of receptors in the body that do our general senses, and this is one of them, baroreceptors. So let's go ahead and get started. And if you recall, when we did tactile receptors, we said that some tactile receptors are responsible for feeling things such as pressure, and they're found underneath the skin. Well, with baroreceptors, it's the same thing. They're going to be responsible for feeling the sensation of pressure, okay? But there's a difference here between these and the ones that are under the skin. Like the ones under the skin, these are going to be free nerve endings, but it's the location that they're found in, okay? If you remember, when we talk about free nerve endings, we are talking about dendrites that are not inside of a capsule, okay? So we're gonna talk more about these in just a minute too. So where do we find these? Well, these are found in the elastic tissues of distensible organs. Okay, this is a textbook definition. So they're found in the elastic tissues of distensible organs. So what does that mean? Well, distensible organs are basically organs that can fill up with something, right? And so they can become larger. So what organs would do this? Or basically what would do this? The first one is going to be blood vessels. Normally, when you hear about baroreceptors, this is what you're going to hear is how they help regulate blood pressure, right? The next one is going to be the lungs, right? And do the lungs fill up with something? Yes, they fill up with air, right? So we're going to talk about the lungs in a minute too. We also have the digestive tract, and it's going to play a few different roles in the at least two different roles in the digestive tract. And then the last one is going to be the urinary bladder. Okay, so let's take a look at how the baroreceptors work real fast, and then we'll talk about where they're located in the different organs and some things that they may do. So I am going to draw a blood vessel here. Okay, and this is going to be the lumen of my blood vessel. Right, so in here, I'm going to have blood. And then this is the rest of the outside, or what makes up the rest of my blood vessel here. Now, I'm just going to draw one baroreceptor, but you're going to have baroreceptors around this whole area here. So here's my baroreceptor there. At the end of free nerve endings, you actually have a bulb, okay? And obviously this would be inside of the blood vessel here, right? Inside the wall there. But we're gonna have this bulb at the end of my free nerve ending. This is the dendrite, right? And once again, this is a free nerve ending. And this is gonna go down to the brain. Actually, it's going to go to the nerve, and then it's going to go to the brain. So here's what's going to happen is, let's say you get up and you go to walk around or something like that, and you've been sitting for a while. Well, what's going to happen is in different parts of your body, you are going to get more blood coming into your blood vessels. Right? So we're going to get an increase in blood. Well, when we get the increase in blood, what's going to happen is we are going to start to get pressure on the walls of this blood vessel. Right? Because we're putting more volume into, or I'm sorry, we're going to put more blood into the same amount of volume, it's going to increase the pressure. When that occurs, it's going to change the shape of this free nerve ending. So now we're going to go, I'm just going to make it like this. Okay, so we've changed the shape of that, right? As we're getting more pressure on here. Remember, these are going all the way around this blood vessel. So here's what's going to happen now. If this is my bulb here, okay, this is still the dendrite here. When we get that change in the shape, what's going to happen is you have channels that are in here, and these are going to open up. And when they open up, now we are going to get ions that are going to go into this bulb. And then if you see my video on action potentials, you'll see what's going to happen now is we are going to send an impulse that's going to go to the brain. most of the things that we talk about today are going to go to the brainstem, the bottom of the brainstem, to an area of the brain called the medulla oblongata. Okay? So, really quick, so what's going to happen is as this expands, we get a change or a distortion of the end of the free nerve ending. When we get a distortion of the end of the free nerve ending, it's going to cause ions to go in, and that's going to send an action potential that's going to go down the nerve, through the axon, and then up to the brain. Let's take a look now of how this works in the cardiovascular system. So now, this is basically an outline or a drawing of our cardiovascular system. Obviously, this is the heart, and this is going to be my aorta, right? And then coming off the aorta, we have the brachiocephalic trunk right here. And then right here, these two are going to be my common carotid arteries. Okay, that's the common carotid there. And then this is, I'm just going to put CC here for my common carotid there. This is going to be my right common carotid. This is going to be my left common carotid over here. The common carotid artery is going to go up, and it's going to, what we call bifurcate or split into two. This is the external carotid. So let me, and the carotid arteries are responsible for bringing blood to the brain. And so this is going to be my external carotid artery on this side, right? Now, if you notice now, we have this here. This is going to be my internal carotid arteries. Okay, so that's my internal carotid artery there, and there's an internal carotid artery there. However, if you notice, we have this kind of like a bulge that's going to be in there. And this is going to be called my carotid sinus. And also, we have an aortic sinus right down here. It's right after the valves of the aorta are here, and coming out of the left ventricle. So let me put aortic sinus right here. So this is going to be my aortic sinus. Okay, and then what's going to happen now in my carotid sinuses, what's going to happen is I am going to have, once again, my baroreceptors. Now, I'm just drawing a few of these. You actually have a whole bunch of baroreceptors, and we're going to have them down in here too. These are going to play a role in regulating blood pressure and getting blood to vital organs. So what's going to happen is this. As the demand for blood increases, we're going to get more blood coming through here, and it's, once again, we're going to get pressure on these bulbs. These are the bulbs that we just drew a minute ago, right? And then we're going to have dendrites coming out of here, right? So what's going to happen is we're going to get the pressure on there, and it's going to change the shape of the bulb, and when it changes the shape of the bulb, it's going to send a signal that's going to go to the brain. Same thing with here. And once again, in this case, the part of the brain that it's going to go to is the medulla oblongata. And then the medulla oblongata is going to do things to regulate the blood pressure, right? So it'll open this up so we can decrease that blood pressure. So once again, we start to get more blood going up into these areas, It sends a signal to the brain, and the brain is going to regulate the blood pressure that we have in there by doing vasodilation of these different blood vessels. Okay, so now let's take a look at how baroreceptors affect the lungs. So now, here's what's going to happen in the lungs, is once again, we're going to have baroreceptors in the elastic tissues here. And again, I'm just drawing a few of these, but they are going to be all over. And so again, as you breathe, the lungs are going to fill up. As they fill up, they're going to put pressure on these baroreceptors. Baroreceptors are then going to send a signal. I'm sorry, their shape is going to change. Then it's going to send a signal to the areas of the brain that are responsible for your breathing rate, which part of that happens to be the medulla oblongata, which again is in the brainstem. So that's the way that baroreceptors affect the lungs. Let's take a look at the digestive system. So now, in the digestive system, this is the role that the baroreceptors are going to play. This here is the stomach. This would be your esophagus up here, right? So this is my stomach. And then I am going to have baroreceptors in the walls of the stomach. Remember, it's an elastic tissue, right? And this is a distensible organ. In other words, this can change shape. It can enlarge, right? So there's my baroreceptors. There's the bulb of my baroreceptors there. And here's what's going to happen is when you eat, you chew the food and you break the food down into something that's called a bolus. So here comes my bolus now, right? And as you continue to eat, you put more and more food into the stomach. Well, what's going to happen to your stomach? It's going to start to expand, right? This is going to start to put pressure on the walls of the stomach. So as it expands, it's going to push this out, and the stomach's going to become larger, right? If you've ever eaten a big meal, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So once again, as it does that, it's going to change the shape of the bulb at the end of those free nerve endings, or the baroreceptors. And when it does that, this is going to stimulate these, and it's going to send an action potential up to the lungs. I'm sorry, not up to the lungs, up to the medulla oblongata. Okay, so it's going to go up to the medulla oblongata. Now what's going to happen, it goes to other areas of the brain too, but what's going to happen now is the medulla oblongata is going to send a signal back, and it's going to start churning, right? That's when the stomach starts mixing up this bolus with the stomach acid that's in there. So as it starts to mix up the stomach acid, this with the stomach acid, this will start to break down kind of like into a soup. And we call that soup chyme. Now, if you want to get an idea of what chyme looks like, if you've ever thrown up, which everybody has, that's basically chyme. If you notice, it looks like a soup. However, it's not completely broken down yet. So what happens is you actually have chunks in there still. And that's why they say like you're hurling chunks or barfing chunks or whatever, right? So it's going to continue to break that down until it's the soup. Then that's going to come down and go into the small intestine. Where you see the red, that's my small intestine. Well, what's going to happen? As I start to get my chyme in the small intestine, you happen to have something in here, the walls of the small intestine, which are going to be called baroreceptors, right? And what's going to happen is these baroreceptors then are going to be, as this stretches out, it's going to put pressure on the baroreceptors, and this is going to send a signal up to the medulla oblongata. And again, there's other parts of the brain too, but it's going to, and what's going to happen now is we are going to have a signal sent back, and it's going to start to cause peristalsis, which is the movement of these, which is the movement of this, right? It's going to start squishing these, so we start to move the chyme along the small intestine. Now, eventually, this chyme's going to get to the large intestine, the colon, which is this purple that you see here, right? So this is my colon, and it's going to eventually get down to this area down in here, which we call the rectum. And the function, the purpose of the colon is to reabsorb water out of this chyme and to basically turn this into poop. So this is going to come down in here, right? And we're going to get poop down here in the rectum. Let's give that a name, poop. All right? So now what's going to happen? Oh, guess what we have down in here? We have something called baroreceptors. So what's going to happen now is those baroreceptors are going to send a signal up to the brain, and it's going to tell you that you have to defecate, that you need to go number 2. Okay? So that's the function of baroreceptors in the digestive system. Let's take a look now at the urinary system. So now, in the urinary system, we have the kidneys, right? You have 2 kidneys. And the kidneys are going to make urine. They're going to regulate the amount of water in your body and things such as that. And when your kidneys make urine, it's going to travel along something called the ureter. And it's going to go down to something called the urinary bladder. Now, one thing I don't have drawn on here is your urethra, right? Which is what the pee comes out from the urinary bladder. But the urinary bladder is a organ that it basically collapses when it's not full. And then as it fills up with urine, it starts to expand. It's made out of something called transitional epithelium. So here's what's going to happen is we are going to get urine coming down into here. So let me go with this. So I'm going to start to get urine in here. And as I get urine in here, this starts to expand out. And as it expands out, guess what's going to be in the walls of the bladder? Baroreceptors. So here's my baroreceptors. And what my baroreceptors are going to do now is they are going to send a signal to the brain. Oh, by the way, this is not going to the medulla oblongata. This is going to go to the pons. The pons is in the brainstem right above the medulla oblongata, right? It's also going to go to the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that's right behind your forehead. And then when it gets there, that's going to tell you that you need to go to the bathroom. You need to urinate, okay? And the more this expands out, the more those signals get. By the way, when you have to go to the bathroom really, really bad, usually your bladder is only about half full. So anyways, that's the role that baroreceptors play in your body. And I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit the like button and please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.